Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. If we go out into the garden in the summer, we'll see bees. As a matter of fact, we have a little patch of flowers in our backyard right near where I park my car. And whenever I pull in or pull out, I can always see the bees going from one flower to the next, to the next, to the next. And of course, there are also flies that you see and mosquitoes that you see. And the flies are inside and outside. But the flies are quite different than the honeybees. The bees go from flower to flower to collect what they need in order to make honey. And at the same time, they take pollen from one flower to the other to pollinate the flowers. The flies, on the other hand, don't go to flowers. They go to vile things. They go to things that smell, things that are left behind, things that are rotted. They go to defecation, they go to urine, they go to rotted fruit. And they land on those things, they stay there, get what they want, and then they go land somewhere else and take whatever was at the previous place to the next place they go. They spread germs, they spread difficulty, and it goes around, and man becomes susceptible to the things that the flies spread around. We, as we go through our life, have to know the difference between what a honeybee does and what a fly does. And we have to become like the honeybee. The honeybee has a stinger, but the honeybee never uses the stinger unless it's in danger. It is essentially constantly doing positive things for everything around it. It is an aid, an assist to itself, to its other bees, and to humanity. Honey is a wonderful substance. It's a cure for many things. Honey doesn't rot. Honey can last for long, 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 long periods of time. We have to know how to take in the way that the flower and the way that the honeybee knows how to take. We have to know the places to go in the way the honeybee knows the places to go. A snake eats mice, but there's also a small animal called a shrew, which looks like a mouse, but it isn't. A shrew has a different kind of bristle on its hair. And if the snake swallows the shrew, the bristles from the shrew make holes in its intestine and kill it. But after it swallows the shrew, if it realizes it swallowed the shrew and tries to bring it back up, as the shrew comes out, it attacks the snake's eyes and goes after the snake that way. So once the encounter with the shrew happens, it's very difficult for the snake. There's no overcoming this encounter. In this way, we have to be very careful about what we encounter in this world and how we go about encountering things in this world. If you go into a river where there are leeches, the leeches attach to your body, and you have to have a methodology to get them off because they sink their teeth into you and begin to draw your blood. I remember I was in Sri Lanka, and I didn't go, but a bunch of the men I was with went swimming in a river, and they all came out with leeches covering their entire bodies. And we spent the rest of the day getting the leeches off them, because leeches don't want to get off once they've attracted themselves to you. Well, it's like that with evil. When evil is encountered, if you allow evil to enter you, if you allow yourself to enter into a relationship with evil, it becomes very, very difficult to draw the evil out of you. It becomes an addiction. And it's easier to explain it when you talk about things like alcohol or drugs that create a physical addiction. But there are also things that create mental addictions, and they are just as powerful as these physical addictions from physical substances. Gambling is as difficult an addiction to overcome as heroin, and lust is as difficult addiction to overcome as heroin. It's said that if a man enters into a relationship with a woman, he'll leave his mother, he'll leave his father, he'll leave his family, but he won't leave the woman. The attraction is so powerful that if he makes the wrong choice and finds a bad woman, she'll take him directly to all sorts of evil. We need to be able to differentiate between what's good and what's evil. Recently, I told the story of the cuckoo bird. The bird is a very beautiful black bird and is capable of many things, but it isn't capable of making a nest. So what it does is it lays its eggs in a crow's nest. First, it goes to the crow's nest, knocks the eggs out, and puts its own eggs in. What this means is that the cuckoo, which is a bird that only eats fruits, which is a vegetarian, a very pure bird, has left its eggs with a bird that's not as pure. The crow is not a pure bird. The crow will eat almost anything and be involved with almost anything. So in its formative years, or its formative days, the cuckoo is raised, the baby cuckoo is raised by a crow, and the crow feeds it not just fruit, which is its normal diet, but it feeds it light insects, crabs, anything that it can find. And the cuckoo is raised this way. Well, eventually the cuckoo begins to grow, and it has a different sound than the crow. And the crow recognizes this different sound. And when it recognizes that it's not its own, the crow tries to kill the baby cuckoos. And then the cuckoos have to escape. They somehow have to get out of the nest and find a way of their own. And it's like that for us. We have an original sound. We have an original understanding. We have a conscience. We have the ability to know the difference between what's right and what's wrong. But we are raised in a world where right and wrong have been lost, where to differentiate between right and wrong is very, very difficult because it's become so confused, so intermingled, and so accepted. We have accepted things that are evil as everyday normative. And when this happens, it becomes really difficult to differentiate and to understand where we should take our stand. It becomes really difficult to know truth and to know that which is ignorance. When we find that we are at odds with the world, when we find that our inner inclination is different than the world's inclination, when we find that what we want to do is different than what the world wants to do, we realize that somehow we are different. And when we realize that this difference exists, this is when we have to do something about it. We have to go into the world and look for someone who can guide us in the appropriate direction and separate for us all of this confusion between what is truth and what is falsehood, what is reality and what is illusion. And to do this, you have to find somebody with wisdom. You have to find somebody who's been through this already, who's gone through trying to find the truth about themselves and has made an examination, trying to figure out what is animal, what is plant, what is a tree, what is a man, what is a weed. They want to find out all of these different sections. So when you find a man of wisdom, what he's capable of doing for you is explaining the truth to you and telling you the difference between right and wrong, telling you the difference between evil and what is appropriate. Each of us needs that kind of guidance. And the truth is that this kind of guidance is not available in most families. This kind of guidance is not available to most people. This kind of guidance is rare in this world. Religions advertise that they give you this kind of guidance, but in truth, religions often lose their way. For instance, religions enter into wars, and then they will tell you that these wars are a form of worship. They tell you that battling and killing is a form of worship. Now, if you attempt to look at that kind of thinking, you can easily conclude that there's something amiss here. It's like a lake that's had 1,000 buffaloes run in it. Each buffalo has its own little spot, and each buffalo has made muddy water in the area that it's in, and it enjoys this muddy water. But if you want to get something to drink out of this water, you can't. You can't because the buffaloes have muddied it. Now, there is still clear water within it, but now it's intermingled with all this mud. So within religions, there is the essence of the truth, but it's become muddied in so many different ways. So we need to find the man who is not subject to trying to promote religion, who's not subject to any self-motive, whether that self-motive is about his own status, his own importance, and his own titles. We need to find a man who is without titles, who is without status, who's become small, and whose only purpose is to aid and assist humanity, is to aid and assist others. This man can release from you your addictions. Think of a sheikh as rehab. Think of a sheikh as going into rehab. Now, when we first came to Bawa, he would say things to us like, some of the children who came to him were in such bad shape that all he could do was hold them close to himself and comfort them. He couldn't tell them anything yet. He could just comfort them until they were at ease enough so that they can listen. So in rehab, they usually take you off substance abuse. But in the sheikh's rehab, if you have substance abuse, he'll take you off substance abuse, but he'll also take you off your attachments to the world. He'll take you off your addictions to the world. He'll take you off your addictions to all of the evil inclinations in this world. He'll take you away from lust. He'll take you away from anger. He'll take you away from jealousy. He'll show you why these things are wrong and what is wrong about these things. And he will give you a program for releasing yourself from these addictions. Now, we should understand that anger is an addiction, and we keep going back to it whenever we fall into stress or fall into difficulty. It's easy to be calm and serene when everything's going your way. But what happens when you think things aren't going your way? What happens then? The mind and desire go into a mode where they will do whatever they think is necessary to fulfill that desire. The sheikh will teach you that the mind doesn't have wisdom, and the mind can't differentiate from what it wants that's good for it and what it wants that's not good for it. It basically imitates the world. And if the world says it's good, the mind accepts the fact that it's good. This isn't necessarily the truth. So we need a focal point that we can turn to that knows the difference between right and wrong and isn't swayed by the titles and the praise of the world, that understands that the world is an illusion and an enemy to the truth, and will take you to the point of truth and allow you to learn what that truth is. Scientists try to find the answers to all of man's dilemmas. Scientists try and, through their methodologies, find the reasoning behind things. A scientist, for instance, will split an atom, but when he splits the atom, he will find that there's more inside of the atom. And when he splits that, he will find more and more particles, smaller and smaller particles. As he goes on, he will find that there's no end to it. Now, he may finally conclude that the answer isn't going to be found through his scientific methodology. It's only going to be found to acknowledging that God is the answer. And as long as he keeps pursuing, trying to find the answer within this elemental world, he will just run into more and more and more examples of the elemental world, more and more smaller pieces of the elemental world, but he'll never come to an end of it, because there is no end to a solution in the elemental world. The only solution comes when you give up your search in the elemental world and you realize that the solution to everything is God, because God is at the end and at the beginning of everything. And God is the answer to all of your questions. And then faith becomes your treasure. Faith becomes what makes you strong. Faith is what takes you over the hills and the valleys of the difficulties of this life. As long as you continue to try and solve each and every dilemma that comes up in this world, you will constantly run into more and more and more dilemmas. You will run into more and more and more problems. When you learn to just go along with the flow of things, allow them to come and to go, but your faith is not in any of these things, then you will find God as the truth to all of your problems. A king lives in a jewel-encrusted bed. He may have a jewel-encrusted crown, and he may have a treasury full of fortune and all kinds of valuable things. But does all of this wealth solve his inner dilemmas? Does it stop the world from running inside of him with all of the complications that the world has? It doesn't. It's only when the king realizes that God is his answer that the king will be able to find peace. There was a king who was traveling on a hunting expedition and ran across an area where he got lost. And as he's wandering, he's becoming thirsty and hungry, and he sees a small shack, and there's a man standing outside. And the man realizes this is a stranger here, and he asks him if he needs anything. And he says, I'm thirsty and I'm hungry, I'm lost, I need to find my way back to so-and-so. Well, he says, come in and I'll feed you and I'll give you something to drink. And I think I know where you came from and I'll give you directions. So he ate and he drank, and the man then gave him directions to get back to where he came from. And the man happened to be the king of the kingdom. And he took off his ring and he said, take this ring. And if you are ever in any kind of difficulty, come to the castle, show them the ring, tell them to let you in, and then you can come see me and I will resolve any problem that you may have. Years went by, and finally there was a drought and the man didn't have food for his family and things were hard. So he traveled to the castle. He showed the ring to the guards. The guards immediately recognized the ring, and they took him inside. And the king was there, and the king was in prayer. The man waited for the king to finish what he was doing. And the king then looked at the man and he recognized him. He said, "You've come. I'm so happy to see you." And the man asked him, "What is it that you were doing when I walked in?" And the king explained that he was praying to the one God who is the one who controls everything. And then he said to the king, "I came here to ask you for help, but why should I ask you for help when you're asking God for help? I need you to teach me how to ask God for help. I need to be able to get help from the one you get help from." Like that, we don't need intermediaries. We need to go directly to God. We need to look directly to God. We need to proclaim that we are indebted to God, that all that we see and all that we hear comes from God, that all that we have and all that we've been given is because of God's generosity. When we begin to understand this, then we will be on the road towards peace. Because when we begin to understand that everything comes from God, we know that there's a cornucopia of abundance and that we are created from that cornucopia of abundance. And if we look appropriately and understand appropriately that everything is available, then we will find contentment within ourselves. In this world, people usually destroy something in order to get what they want. Wars are fought over getting what different countries want. And people fight with other people to get what it is that they want. Is there something that we can attempt to obtain that doesn't involve conflict with someone else? Is there something that we can attempt to obtain that doesn't involve killing others or harming others or taking from others, or some way creating a situation where there's difficulty? There is. But to understand that, we have to understand the nature of that treasure and how that treasure is more valuable than any treasure within this world. How that treasure is more valuable than any of the treasures within this world of illusion. And the Sheikh can show you how that is and why that is. When you're with a teacher who has kindness, who has generosity, who has compassion, who has mercy, and who displays love on a consistent basis, and you're able to spend time within the confines of those qualities, and you're able to feel what those qualities do to you and for you, you can begin to understand that the value of those qualities is greater than any elemental treasure that you can find in this world. Being in a state of love, being in a state of kindness, being in a state of mercy, being near compassion is more rewarding to you than all of the jewels in the king's vault. It does more for your state of contentment than any material treasure can do. Why is it that all of the rich people in the world don't have enough money? Why is it that the ones who've accumulated the most are trying to accumulate more? Why is it? Because there's no satisfaction in accumulation. And when they turn and ask, why is there no satisfaction in all I've accumulated? Satan comes and whispers in their ear and says, it's because you don't have enough yet. Just get more, and satisfaction will come. Of course, Satan is a liar, and more is not the solution. The solution is looking in a different place. The solution is in trying to find where true contentment lies. There was a kingdom that had a very generous and kind king. And the king was ill. And many people in the kingdom were very worried about the king and wanted to be able to help him somehow. Many physicians were brought in. All kinds of people were brought in to try and help the king, and nothing helped. One day, a man playing a violin walked into the town square, and he was playing joyful songs, but he felt a sadness within the kingdom, and he felt there was something wrong, and he asked people what was wrong. And they said, there's a great sadness here because the king is ill. And as much as we've tried to do something about his illness, we haven't been able to do it. So he began to play his violin and he began to sing. And at the end of the song came the words, and the way that you can cure the king is to give him the shirt of a man who is content. So they thought, this must be the answer to our dilemma. And they began to look for a man who was content. They looked at the noblemen, but they were busy trying to get richer. They weren't content at all. They went to the merchants. The merchants were worried about how much money they were going to make and about inflation and about how difficult it was to get goods. And they weren't finding any contentment there. They went to the peasants, and all the peasants wanted to do was change the status quo and revolt. There was no happiness there. They kept going, and they ended up in the woods. And they walked for a while in the woods, and they heard a man singing. And he was very, very joyous. And they continued to follow the sound, and they saw an older man having a very simple meal and water from the stream, sitting and singing. And they said, we found the joyous man. And when they got near him, they saw he wasn't wearing a shirt. So what to do? So the man who was singing continued to sing. And in the words from his song was, if you stay with me and you understand what makes me content, you can also become content. And all of the ones who were trying to help the king sat with him, and soon they became content, and soon they were all wearing shirts. So there was now plenty of shirts to give to the king. We need to be with people who are content. People who are content will help us become content. People who are content can transfer their qualities to other people. One of the miracles of the sheikh is that the qualities that the sheikh has, the sheikh is capable of transferring to all the ones who come to him. And that's why we come. He told us, become like me. And we all began to understand that the purpose of our life was to become like him. We understood that what was going to make us truly human and truly content was to become like him. We understood that contentment couldn't be found, can't be found anywhere else than to be like him. And that's when we discover that Allah's qualities, kindness, justice, mercy, compassion, is where contentment lie. And everything else is a sham. Everything else is a lie. Everything else takes on the visage of bringing contentment, but in truth cannot bring contentment. It can just bring you more and more desire for things in this physical world. And this physical world can never fulfill your desires. It's not within its capacity. Understand that peace is a name of God. Generosity is a name of God. Love is the reason for creation. All of it came about through love and kindness, and we will find truth and contentment in ourselves when we turn from the mind towards wisdom. And wisdom comes from our heart. Wisdom comes from our connection to other people. Wisdom comes from finding contentment without having to usurp something from someone else. Wisdom comes from finding contentment in ourselves and with others simultaneously. Wisdom doesn't separate ourselves from others in finding our contentment. Wisdom incorporates others in finding our contentment. So we have to understand that truth brings about unity. Truth brings about togetherness. Truth does away with separation. And when we can do this, then we can truly find contentment. And contentment is not found in the form. Contentment is found in the formless. And when we begin to understand that the formless is more powerful than the form, that the formless is more important than the form, then we are constantly, then we will begin to be moving in the right direction on the straight path towards unity and towards knowing our Lord. May this come to pass for each and every one of us. May we all come to know where the truth lies. May we all come to understand where reality is. May we all come to know who we truly are and what it is that guides us and takes us to the truth. May that happen, and may that happen quickly for each of us. Ameen, ameen. Ya Rabbil Alameen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh.